My name is Rose Donahue. I have long, wavy red hair, white skin, and I am wearing a dark blue shirt. I have a plain yellow wall behind me. And today I am doing an interview on behalf of the Youth Organized Disabled and Proud group, also known as YO. And I'm going to be speaking with an activist, the writer of the book Becoming Real in 24 Days, an all around awesome person. She'll be speaking with me about the late, great, and iconic leader in the disabilities rights movement, Ed Roberts. I am pleased to introduce HolLynn D'Lil. HolLynn, could you give us your image description and pronouns? Mine are she, hers.
My image description pronouns are neutral, whatever that is, however you can
Yeah.
achieve that.
Do you have long hair or short hair?
I have very long, very red, springy, curly hair that spans out of around my head for about 2 feet.
Oh, I love that. You and
I
I
do
could be
too.
twins. Love it. All right. So I'm going to hop in. When you think back about Ed Roberts, what is the impression he left on you? What's the essence that
You
you
know,
think
the
of when
image
you
I
think of him?
always have of Ed when I think of him, and it's not infrequent because he left his mark in many, many places, um, is of energy. And, he took up more space than usual because he was often semi reclined in his wheelchair. So that took up more space, and he usually had at least three people around him at all times. So he took up a lot of space materially and in energy, and it was very positive energy. And the image when I think of that is of looking over his shoulder. He's always trying to throw his head back further so he could see around the corner of his wheelchair, and smiling. He was always smiling. High energy person.
I imagine he needed that energy with all of the work he was doing with
Yeah.
you and others.
He was also very good at delegating.
That
Let
is
me tell you,
important. Uh-huh.
it is. I met Ed at I never heard of it before. I didn't know what a 504 was, but there was a 504 uh, demonstration in 1977. And I ended up going, and for some reason, I ended up taking about 300 photographs because, well, I know the reason. I was blown away. It's like, rights? I have rights? What? It just blew my mind, just bowled me over. So I ended up taking over 300 photographs, and in fact, they're in my book, Becoming Real in 24 Days, which is how long the sit-in lasted. That started April 5th, 1977. So, what was the question? I'm sorry, I got lost.
No, you were just having a conversation and you expounded on my question by talking about how much energy Ed had.
Yeah.
Um, for some context about you, what was it that was surprising to you about like you having rights at this 504 event?
Oh, it's 1977. So people with disabilities didn't have rights. I mean, in fact, I'm one of the reasons that we have curb ramps and wider doorways and grab bars because, and that gets me back to Ed's quality, great quality of delegating. We met at the 504 demonstrations in 1977, and he put me to work. He put me to work in the Department of Rehab, and I had worked with the Department of Housing and gotten them to incorporate into their building code some standards for accessibility and housing and units. Of, first, it was four or more condos and three or more apartments, but we made some progress later into three or more condos and apartments. And so I passed him in the Department of Rehab hall one day. Say, hey, we did it. I did it, Ed. We got the access standards in housing. He says, okay. His eyes were already calculating, and he put me to work on getting access standards into the California Building Code, which would cover all public accommodations, and which we did, which I did with the help, of course, of many, many people across the state. We put together a 60-member volunteer organization who worked at the local levels and state levels to get those first standards into the building code.
Wow. So he was truly an organizer
And delegator.
and delegator. He was thinking the whole thing through and then implementing with
Absolutely.
all of the wonderful people around him.
And you know what's remarkable? I have to tell you this. He did this in a bureaucracy, in a rusted, old, ironclad bureaucracy that hadn't done anything innovative. And I'm sorry whose toes I'm stepping on, for decades. But they had their structure, they had their pattern, they had their traditions. And Ed just blew all that out the water and got in there and started making changes.
What do you think were some qualities Ed had that enabled him to, first of all, have like the confidence to get in there and do that, and then have the success that he had?
Well, he was fearless. Here he was. Of course, his mother was a part of his act, and they were quite a team. But it was definitely Ed and his energy and his vision and his courage, that he wasn't bound by tradition, to say the least. And he got into this rusted old bureaucracy and started rearranging the walls and made the front door bigger. And he just did it with his courage and his vision.
Yeah. Do you have a memory, like a story about him that you remember that kind of encapsulates some of those qualities?
Oh, I have so many. I'll have to figure them out. Well, okay, this is about me too, but when I was working under Ed and I was told to go get access standards into the California Building Code, which I did by working with many people. But one of the things I did, if I needed to talk to a legislator, I called them. If I needed to talk to the state architect, I called them. I talked to the director of Department of Parks and Rec. I mean, if I needed to talk to somebody, I called them and we worked it out. However, the problem was I was a very low level bureaucrat. And when Ed left office, the manager of my department, my office in the Department of Rehabilitation, called me into his office and said, "You will never go back to the legislature again. You will not contact the state architect. You will not contact the director of any department again unless you get my permission and the permission of the 3 managers above me."
What?
So my wings were thoroughly clipped, but it was too late because we'd already gotten the accessible building standards into the California Building Code. But see, that was Ed. That was Ed. He didn't do that. He just said, "Go get it done, HolLynn." He didn't see the rusty old bureaucracy.
Right.
He just saw what he wanted to be done, and he got it done.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's such a valuable characteristic for leadership. And as you said, he's a great delegator. You have to trust the people around you to do the things that you're asking and to have the energy and interest to pursue it themselves.
Right.
What do you think his dream would be, his most ideal situation for disability rights and just the world today?
What would be his dream?
His ideal situation.
His ideals are reached today. Well, in a way, because of Ed, they have been. You couldn't look at Ed and see a pathetic little cripple. And that's impacted the way people with disabilities in society generally are viewed. He knocked that stereotype down big time. just being around him, you couldn't think of him as a pathetic little cripple. No way. So that was a huge change.
Had you interacted with many people like him before?
No, I hadn't, which is why he blew my mind. And and given the opportunity to work for him, I just, yeah. So.
And you had been a writer for Miss Magazine, is that correct?
Well, I wrote an article once, and they published.
Okay. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. Did you do any type of media training with him and other people involved in the movement?
You know, if I did, I don't recall at this moment. Quite a while ago.
Sure, of course. Because there was a lot of public attention. So I wonder what were some of his ways of motivating other people to understand the value of disability rights, even if they didn't get it at the beginning.
I think mainly because he personified it. And he personified it, disability rights and disability place, and that people with disabilities are not pathetic and useless. Because he was, you know, the opposite of those words. And he developed relationships with the legislature and with other department heads, and he was such a dynamic person that it was an honor to be associated with it in some way.
Could you expand a little bit about how he personified the value of inclusion? You mentioned it a little bit because he was very active and not a helpless person at all. But could you describe some other characteristics about him?
Other than his inclusion, you said?
Yeah, sure. So for my last question, you said that he personified the value of disability rights and being inclusive.
Right. Yeah.
And I was just wondering if you could expand on how he personified that in his actions and words.
And then well, let's see. He was associated with Governor Brown at the time. You know, Governor Brown appointed him to be the director of rehabilitation. And also at the same time that he was appointed by Governor Brown, this movement was building for disability rights, which was exploded in the 10-city demonstrations in 1977, where people with disabilities were demonstrating for rights. And so he couldn't participate in those demonstrations because he was an appointee of Governor Brown. But his power and his position were certainly there behind that effort. And it was amazing, 3.5-week takeover of the federal building in San Francisco. I don't think it's been duplicated, except maybe that group of people, of ranchers who took over some land for a while. And I'm sorry, I don't have more details on that. But it was the longest takeover of a government facility at that time.
Sure. Yeah, that was an amazing feat. And the film Crip Camp goes into that a lot. And you were interviewed in that film as well. So I'm just saying that because oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I was saying, and they used 94 of my photographs that I took during the demonstrations, which I thought was
you're not only an activist but an archivist.
Yeah. Funny.
So what was the age range of people participating in the protests and working around Ed?
It was the whole range. Like my photographs, some person, one of the people in the movements who's kind of cranky said, "Oh, it's just a bunch of white people," and I said, "No, it wasn't." And I've got the photographs to prove it. And if you look at my photographs, there were many Hispanic and many black people and some Asian people. I mean, it was multiracial, and it was certainly, there were children. I have pictures of children marching in the plaza before the federal building, and I think some were spending the night. So it was all age ranges, from children to elderly.
Wow. And I mean, disability crosses all humanity. It's disability doesn't discriminate by race. It impacts everyone. So it ought to be a group effort.
And it certainly was.
Yeah.
As my photographs demonstrate. I was going to say,
that's
as
awesome.
my photographs demonstrate.
Right. Then that's part of the value of having those photos. There's words say so much, but of course, the photo document is just humans are visual people, so it's great to have that option. So, so you were around all sorts of different people, different ages. Are there some lessons that you think young people today could use? Things that you may have learned from Ed or during your experience during 1977?
Yeah, well, I think probably every generation of people with disabilities has to learn that they have value, because I'm sure even today you're treated as if you have no value because you're disabled. But I think that what we did in 1977 was certainly set an example, and it certainly achieved a lot in that we got the first federal standards passed for Section 504 of the 1973 Rehabilitation Act, which was really the precursor to the Americans with Disabilities Act. And if we hadn't done what we did, if we hadn't fought, see, they had, led by Judy Heumann and others, I can't think of her name right now, but there was another woman from the East. And if I have my book here, I could get those names out for you. They're not in my head anymore. But there were several leaders, especially in the East, who worked on a set of standards to implement Section 504 that they'd all agreed to by January 1 of 1977. And then President Carter came in and didn't like those standards and wanted to rewrite them. And that's what started the uproar. And so what people were really fighting for in, when was it, April of 1977, was that President Carter implement what everybody had already agreed to, not just people with disabilities, but department heads and all the representatives. They'd all agreed to a set of standards, and that's what they wanted. And Carter did capitulate after, well, I'll tell you the real reason why he capitulated. And few people know this. What had happened is that we had a reporter from Channel 7 in the Bay Area who loved what we were doing, couldn't get enough of it. And he was there every day at the building following the story. And then a group of 20 or so of us flew back to D.C. to carry on the battle there and bolster up the activists, the Eastern activists, and what they were trying to do. And which is, of course, get these regulations we had agreed to signed by President Carter. And so this reporter, his name was Evan White. He deserves a huge medal. And he followed us back there, took pictures, kept sending stories back to Channel 7 in the Bay Area. And once he did it, toward the end, when Carter capitulated because Evan sent his story and photographs back to the Bay Area, and he was told that there was a technician strike, and therefore they would have to send the story out all over the country, which they did, and that's what broke the camel's back, or Carter's back. So became a national story.
Right. The
Yeah.
general public was getting behind it once they were
Right.
informed.
Yeah, it's just an accident and the perseverance of Evan White.
Wow.
Yeah, it was
What
like
did
magic.
Ed, yeah, what was Ed's reaction to that?
What? Oh, absolutely. Ed changed my life. He gave me that job for one thing and turned me loose. Like I said, I was operating at a level far above what was I? I was an associate analyst or something, very low level bureaucrat. And he gave me a job that had me talking to department heads and legislators and the governor and so I didn't have much of an idea of how I was supposed to act when I did actually go to work for the state. I took some harsh meetings in the manager's office to accomplish that.
A little too bold at first, in their
Yeah,
opinion,
right.
but they should have had Ed in there instead of
They
them.
should have. Oh yeah. Well, Ed just didn't see walls.
Yeah.
There were no walls. There was no bureaucracy. There was just what he wanted to happen, and that was
Mhm.
it.
Did he have
So,
like a catchphrase or anything? Like, was
and
there
I
ever?
have to say, let me just say one more thing. And
Oh yeah.
he was working as the appointee of Governor Jerry Brown the Younger, who is not the same person as Governor Jerry Brown the Elder. They're two different
Mm,
people. So that's how Ed could do what he did. He was working for Governor Jerry Brown the Younger. I'm sorry, what was your question?
no, that's okay. That's helpful to specify. Yeah, my question was like, did he have a catchphrase or anything? Like, was there ever like when something went
Oh,
right, would he say something every time, or
I'm
like I don't
sure he,
know?
I'm sure he did, but I don't remember. I wish I
Okay,
did.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Um, were there any? Do you recall any specific words of wisdom he gave you, or do you find that mostly you learn lessons through his actions?
Actually, it was get her done. I mean, I don't know if he said it that way, but every he just said get it done. Just there, ignore the barriers. Just get it done. And that was it.
That's good. It's a good
Yeah,
directive.
right, exactly.
You can apply it to lots of different tasks
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
all going in the same direction. That's good. I like that.
And let me tell you, he was not popular as he was not a popular director of the Department of Rehabilitation. They had a very old, as I said, rusty bureaucracy, and he, shattered some things around there.
That's cool. What would Ed do? I imagine at the time there might have been some fairly blatant moments where people were unkind. What would Ed do in those situations?
Yeah. I really don't know. I was quite a bit below Ed bureaucratically. I was 2 floors below. But, so I didn't see a lot of interaction between him and the rest of the department.
Mm,
But there were some savvy guys. I knew one, Tom, I can't think of his last name, but who really appreciated Ed and what he was doing. And of course, there were people who resented the change.
mm.
So it's going to happen. And it takes someone strong like Ed to ignore it, the unhappiness of those who are having to undergo change.
Mhm.
So anyway, if anybody could do it, he could, and he did.
Yeah. So you mentioned his mother earlier and that she was, kind of part of the team. Um, and I
His
imagine,
mother, his mother, you said?
yes, his mother.
Well, not for very long. She was there a little bit, but
Oh, okay. Um, can you think of anything in Ed's upbringing that you know about that led him to have the strength that he did to do this work?
I think, for what I know, and I didn't witness any of it or anything, but his mother was very instrumental in developing his uppity attitude, I'm sure. So, and she just wouldn't let him be excluded. I'm not from my own observation, but from what I just understood.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you familiar with any experiences he had? Did he share any experiences with you that um, motivated him to pursue this work?
No, I didn't know him personally that much,
Oh,
and I
okay.
worked for him. And
Hmm.
I met him in April and went to work for him in September. So
How
that
did
was
you guys
it.
meet?
It's demonstrations. The
Specifically,
night,
got it.
yeah, I think it was in April of '77 that we had the demonstration, and I didn't know anything about the 504 demonstration. I'd never heard of it before. I just fell into it because a man I was dating said I had to go. And so, okay. And changed my life.
So did you guys just meet whilst marching down the street, or how did you and Ed actually cross paths? What was that moment?
Hmm. Well, I don't remember. It was at the 1977 demonstrations, and I was all over the place taking photos. So I
Sure.
was sure I was standing out because I was taking photos. I got some good ones of him too. Yeah, I've got quite a few of him.
That's cool.
So, yeah,
So he might have seen you and was curious about your work, what you were up to,
yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah,
which I guess another testament to his leadership skills, because it takes a special eye to identify um, team members, you know, and
yes,
you joined his team.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, hadn't thought of it that way, but it's true. I was documenting for him, and
You say it again. Sorry. You were what
I
for
was
him?
documenting for him.
Right.
I think I told you the legitimate reporter from Channel 7 was there and went with us back to DC. And then uh, at one point, some of his photos got lost, but he did enough to spread it nationally. So that's really what I think made President Carter go ahead and allow our civil rights to be enacted into law or
Mm-hmm.
given the power of law through
Wow.
regulation. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, in a democracy, having a lot of the population on your side sure does help.
It does. I was surprised even today the general population is very much for disability rights. Very
Mm-hmm.
much so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and that's thanks to the work that you all were doing and that Ed was
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
Um, if we if we started doing the work y'all were doing in the 70s today, we would not be where we are today.
That's right.
Sorry,
That's
that was a
right.
very silly way of going about saying that.
It's true. But,
Yeah.
one of the things people enjoy today is curb cuts, curb ramps. And they can zoom down on their bicycles and then they're with their kids' strollers. And, they serve a lot of people. Same thing with the wider doorways, people at their
Mm-hmm.
bicycles or their walkers, and people who are not in a wheelchair but maybe a little unstable use the grab boards in the bathroom. And the accessibility standards accommodate a wider range of people than was originally foreseen or cared about, basically.
I'm going to do our last question now. And I really would like to know if you have any other comments that you want to share about Ed and the work that you guys did.
Well, it was the most exciting time of my life, to be in Ed's sphere, even though it was 2 floors down. he he just was a change maker, and um, I didn't even realize so much at the time that I wasn't supposed to be talking to a legislator from my low level in the department. I was an associate analyst, I think is what I was. So I was just supposed to be an analyst. That's all I was supposed to do. And being in Ed's sphere just took me and educated me beyond what I could possibly have accomplished without being in his sphere and being part of his goal and helping him with his goals. Yeah, he enabled a lot of people to go beyond what they thought they could.
Wow. Well, that's super beautiful. Thank you so much, HolLynn. This was a great interview.